Hi, I'm Patty Dunn. I'm so glad you joined me this morning. We're going to talk about skirts. And the reason I'm going to talk to you about skirts this morning is because many of you have asked me for some garment construction information, and I would like to help you with that. And I also think that skirts are really popular to wear right now, and they're very, very easy to make. So we're going to do two kinds of skirts. One will be just a regular waistband, elastic waistband, and then we're going to do one that has a dart so you can see both ways. So let's get started, because we're going to go through the process this morning of making the choice, which is very important, choice of pattern and fabric. And then we're going to do some fitting information, and then we're going to construct it, and we're going to finish. So let me explain right now about the very most important thing is to know what to marry together. These are the two things that are very important when you begin for a successful garment. The first thing is that you need to have the right type of fabric for the right type of pattern. And so I'm going to talk about two kinds of fabric. The fabric that you might decide on might be soft, like this, which really is a slinky and it's a knit, but you can also have other things that are soft. And then there is a, I would say, hard or stiffer type fabric. This is more like a twill or something that is a little stiffer, and you can see that it doesn't have a drape as much as the first one. Now, these are two kind of far between, but then we also have something like a rayon, which again is very soft, and then we have a cotton type fabric, which again doesn't have a drape in the same way. So if you think about the hand of the fabric, and that's how it feels in your hand and how it drapes, you really need to decide what kind of a design will go with that so that it drapes on your body and it sets well on over your hips and it's flattering. If you get the wrong type of fabric with, let's say you put a real snug fitting knit skirt together, you're going to see every bump and you're not going to be happy. So I want to explain to you that there is sometimes when you need to think about ease also, and how much ease goes into something. Now here is just a regular black skirt. Everybody needs a black skirt, and this would be the most simplest skirt that you could make. This is just a plain skirt, no darts, elastic waistband, straight up and down. And it's really made out of slinky, but you could do it out of a soft rayon or any kind of soft fabric. This has a little more ease to it, and it just has a little waistband, elastic waist inserted, and I'm going to tell you about that a little later. Then here is a little stiffer fabric. Now here's what I was talking to you about, the stiffer fabric. This is a moire taffeta, and it doesn't have the drape. So it's going to sit on my body more snugly, and it's going to skim the body, and it's going to show the shape. So that's the reason why I put darts into this one. So there's darts in the back and there's darts in the front, and then there's a zipper in the back. The other one didn't have a zipper. So, and then just to give you a little fast, quickie look at something else, here's one that's cut on the bias, and then all it has is just a little waistband, just a bias band that comes over the top, and it's not even a waistband, it's just to keep the waist in place. So this is just some ideas of what you come up with skirts, and I'm telling you there are tons of skirts that you can make. You know that because you've seen lots of skirts out there. So let's talk about the first process of, after we decide what we want to use, and maybe we want to think about our bodies first so we know what might look best on us. But let's talk about what our issues in fitting might be, and also how we would make our measurements, take our measurements. So here's 3 different women here, and as you can see, they're the same person, but one has a little more definition in the waist, and this one is a little bit more hippie, but still has a lot of definition in the waist. And this one right here has no definition in the waist. So I want you to think about what you fall into category-wise. Some of you may be more on one side than the other. Some of you may be a perfect, 6? And then you don't have to worry about all these fitting issues. Just go get a pattern and it'll probably fit you just great. But most of us have got a little more padding than the average pattern gives us, unfortunately. So we need to know what we're coming up against when we start to cut that pattern. Before we cut it, we want to know how it's going to fit. So let's talk about how we will take our measurements. The first thing I want you to do is get a 1-inch piece of elastic. And the elastic is going to go around your waist. Now, that looks like a knot, but I would suggest that you take and put a safety pin in it so that you have a nice, secure, flat waistband right here. And the reason why we're going to do that is because we want to have the places for to be sure that we know where we're marking, and your waist may be, your hip may be high or something. That will help you see that. So what we're going to do is take that waist measurement. So once you go around your waist, take the waist measurement, then put the elastic on for the length measurements. So now we're going to take our measurement from the width, the length of the waistband, bottom of the waistband, down to the high hip. Now sometimes if you have a fuller tummy, you're going to end up with this a little higher or a little lower. So I suggest that you make this number visible on your measurements. So if this is 3 inches from the bottom of your waist to that high hip area or full tummy area, that may be full tummy area instead of the higher part of your hip, then write number 3 there if that's what it is. 3 inches from here to here, and then take your width all the way across. Then you're going to take you from your waist to the fullest part of your hip. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to make that length number there so that you know how far down it is, and then you're going to take the measurement across your full hip. Here is the way that you can see this a little easier. If you notice right here, this body is a little bit higher than this body in the hip. Do you see how the fuller part of the hip is lower on this one? That means that she may be a 7 in length from here to here, and she may be a 9 from here to here. Now, I will tell you that what happens is very often the pattern companies have an adjustment that is exactly what they think you should be. Well, more than likely, because we have petite people, we have tall people, we have people with long bodies, we have people with short bodies. So how are they going to know? So you have to decide what's the best thing and how it works for you. Those are very, very easy measurements. If you have a friend, get the friend over and see if you can't take some accurate measurements. And the other thing is, if you have a real full tummy, you may want to sit down in a chair and take another measurement just to make sure that, or a very full hip also, just to make sure that you don't spread a whole lot more. And if you do, make a note of that, because that means you need a little extra ease. And I'll talk about ease in a little while. So now let's talk about what we do with the pattern. Okay, I'm going to show you the 2 different patterns. I told you that earlier. And this one up here on the top is going to have a casing. And this is the thing that I've found whenever you get a pattern that is in the stores, most of the time they have no definition in the waist. Now, obviously, you really have to have, if you're going to not put a zipper in, you're going to have more width in the waist. But you really need to go ahead and have a little bit of an indentation in the waist. And the reason you need to have that is because it's going to look a little less full right here. If you take every bit of this hip measurement up here, you're going to end up, it's going to be bulky. So you want to take that and make sure that you have a little bit of definition here. Now what you need is 2 to 4 inches of ease. So here's take your hip measurement, your high hip measurement, your low hip measurement, measure these and add 2.5 inches to whatever, or 2 to 4 inches depending on your fullness of your hips. And then you're going to add, and we'll talk about how you add it and take it away a little bit later. So here is where I have taken my width a little bit down. Just, do you see how that just comes in just slightly with your waist? And so then my casing, if my casing is wider at the top, it's going to end up real bulky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the casing, but I'm going to make sure that that casing matches exactly what the top part of this does. So if this casing does not come out the same way as this, you're going to have a problem. So make sure that that casing, do you see how it goes out right there? It needs to follow the same line of the first part of that hip. Now let's talk about the dart here. Okay, here's the dart. This is the way the darted skirt's going to look. And again, this is what you're going to want to do in your width, your length. You're going to get your length, then you're going to get your widths, and now we're going to go over to another board and we're going to talk about how you're going to make those changes on your pattern. So now here is some little half patterns. This is the front. This is the way your pattern's going to look. So I want you to see. If I love the pivot and slide method, and if I have to put a little extra in my hip, what I will do is I will take on another piece of paper, I will make the outline of my skirt, and then I will pivot over. I will make, let's say this is my low hip at 7 inches or whatever, so I found my 7-inch line, and then I need, let's say I need a 2 inches. That means that you need to divide that by half. So each one of these is going to be divided by 4. The reason is you have 4 seams, front, back, and both sides. So you're going to take a 1/2 inch on each side, and that's going to give you 2 inches all the way around. So here's my 1/2 inch mark. I'm going to make that mark. I'm going to move the pattern over there, and then I'm going to just draw in my curve, if I can do that without making a mess. Okay, now what I'm going to do is move my, did you notice I put my pin at the very, very top of this, and then I'm going to move my pin down, and my board doesn't want to really cooperate a little, but that's okay. Now I'm going to pivot back to the bottom. Now you may want that fullness, so you may want to go straight down, just move it straight. If you want to come back to the original bottom, then you just take that line and draw it until you reach that change right there. Okay, so there's your hip measurement difference. Now, let's say we wanted to do just the waist. Maybe your hip is fine, and remember, you got to have a little bit of ease in there. If you want a little bit of extra in the waist, and by the way, the waist only needs 1 inch, but if you are going to go with the waist band, not a waistband, but a elastic band, you're going to go ahead and make this band the hip measurement that you have. Now, you don't need that much ease, so it's the original hip measurement and not the ease measurement. Okay, so now we're going to slide this over. We're going to take this measurement, just like that, and take a look. How about that? Very easy, very easy. You're not afraid of fitting anymore, are you? Okay, so let's say we have a full tummy. Okay, that means that your tummy kind of protrudes out, and you're going to probably end up with just a little bit of height right in the center of the tummy. And the way you will know that is by taking your measurement from this point underneath the elastic to the floor, and this point to the floor, and this point to the floor, and you will know. Also, if your elastic wants to bow up, that's a good indication. So let's just say we need to lift this about 1/4 of an inch. All we need to do is just pick up the pattern, 1/4 inch at the center, and we have this mark again. Okay, so here's this. Now, sometimes when you have an extreme amount of fullness in the tummy, you may need to cut and slash the pattern. So what's going to happen is when you do that, you need to pull this, slash it through the dart, pull this out, and what will happen, and then when you pull this up, this is going to do the same thing that this other adjustment did, but it's going to add a little bit of fullness here so that you have a little extra across the belly part of your stomach. And so that one's real easy too, but a little more complex if you have to start fighting the pattern as far as, cutting the pattern. So let's talk about the back, because a lot of people have a sway back. And if you go straight, it's going to end up that you'll have these little bubbles right in the back, right under your waistband. If you have those little waves, then you have a sway back, and you need to go ahead and make a little adjustment in the back. And all you have to do with that is probably just 1/4 of an inch, tip your pattern down, and there again, just follow that line, and you will end up with the back having a little bit of a dip. And it really will work for you. I guarantee it will not be hard. Now, one more thing I want to talk about, and that's your high hip, in case you have two different levels of hips. And I'm not talking about high hip measurement, I'm talking about height of hip. Sometimes when we get a little older, we carry too many babies and we get a little side lopsided here. So what you need to do is take your measurement, and this is very simple to figure this out, because what's going to happen is that elastic is going to tip. So what you need to do is figure out what the difference is and which hip it is. And then then basically what I do, it's the easiest thing that you can do, is cut the pattern out, both patterns the same, and then cut the side that's not high back down. So what I do is, again, I tip my pattern, just like I did before. I tip my pattern up and out, and so then I have a little bit of fullness on the very top, and then it's going to look a little bit like this, where you have a little bit of extra fullness right here. And then the most important thing is to put the wrong side of the fabric to you, because that's the way the front is going to sit on you. And then you will know that this is your right side or your left side, and then you will know which one. Then you're going to cut the side that is not the high hip. So the high hip is cut first, and then you're going to cut it down. And then you want to do the mirror image on the back. And all of these adjustments, you'll have to do the mirror image. The back side is going to need to have all the adjustments as the front side. I've only showed you the front side. Those are very, very simple, very common issues that you run into, and I know that this is going to help you to kind of get over the hurdle of wondering, is that going to fit, before you spend the time. Now you're going to need to come back, because we're going to next talk about the construction of the skirt. Thanks for watching. Hi, and welcome back to skirts. All about skirts. We're talking about now how to construct the skirt. And I know that when you buy a pattern, a lot of times your guide has all kinds of information in it, but sometimes it doesn't know what kind of fabric you're working with. It may give you information on, yes, use rayon and linen, but all of those things behave differently, so you really need to think about what the fabric's going to do, and in the way of finishing and deciding what to choose. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the different ways that you can do the finishing and construction of the skirt. And I'm telling you, once you get the fitting and the cutting done, the construction is a breeze, especially if you choose an elastic waistband. So let's come over here and take a look at some of the things that we need to know about finishing. First of all, if you have a serger, that is the easiest way to finish your seams, edges, and it also will be the cleanest and fastest, and it's gonna be all in one take. You will cut the fabric and stitch the edge, and it'll be nice and flat. If you don't have a serger, which I know many don't have a serger, and especially if you're starting out with just new sewing, you may not want to try to get a serger and learn how to do the serger and all the things that go with that, because it is a little more complex. Then you do have some things on your machine that you can use to make an edge that will be a finish. And you do have to have some finishes on most fabrics because they're going to fray. So here is a stitch that most of the sewing machines have. It's an overcast stitch, and it'll have a special foot with it. Be sure if you use this stitch that you use the foot that they recommend, because that has a little tongue, and when you zigzag over top of the tongue, it sort of holds the fabric flat, and that's why you use that. Now this stitch right here is not just a zigzag stitch, but it's a three-step zigzag stitch. And so what it does is it zigzags, making straight stitches in between the zigzags. And notice how nice and flat that is. And actually, if you will use that instead of a zigzag stitch, you will have a little less puckering on the edge. Now, of course, you can also, this is the old-fashioned way, you can use your pinking shears. But I do have to say, there's a lot of people who use these pinking shears, and they have a nice flat seam and it looks real good. So that's a very easy way, but I will suggest that you get a nice pair of pinking shears, and don't get a cheap pair because they don't sharpen very easily. So spend a little money and get a nice pair of pinking shears if you're going to use those. Now here's a product that you could use it's really a nice easy way to put an edge to the seam, to the fabric. And this is called Seams Grate, and all you do, it has a little natural curve. It's a piece of tricot, and it's in a strip. It's cut in a strip, and all you're going to do is just stitch, roll it onto the edge of the fabric, and stitch right along the edge, so you're stitching it down. And that's a nice, clean, and very thin finish. And then a lot of the very expensive garments that you will look at in the stores will actually have this finish on them. And what they have done is they have turned the edge of the fabric down and then they have stitched down the very, very edge, very, very narrow. And to do that, it's a little bit easier for you if you will use a foot that has a little bit of a, it's called an edge stitch foot, and it has a little guide right in the center, and when you lay that guide right up against that edge of the fold, and then you move your needle position over, it will give you exactly what you need for being right on the mark, and it'll be straight, which we all love to be straight, right? So that's your finishing, and I know that you can pick out one of those, and it will be easy. And if you have a knit, you may not have to do a thing, because knits don't ravel. So if that's the case, and there's not very many fabrics that don't ravel. Maybe suede doesn't ravel, but anyway, you've got that as a choice also. So now let's talk about putting an elastic waist in, and this is the easiest one that you can do. Normally, if you don't have to do a casing, you just have probably about 1.5 inches that you're going to turn down, and then you get an elastic. You're going to turn it down, you're going to finish the edge, turn it down, and you're going to stitch, leaving open a wide enough spot so that you can take this elastic through. And so then you're going to take the elastic right in to the casing and draw the elastic across using a pin or a bobbin or something like that, where you've got to have a little bit of stability to it. And the only hard part is getting over the seam. And you can see that's what I was just doing. Okay, so then you're going to pull that all the way around your skirt top. And by the way, I didn't say sew the side seams up first. So once you finish, you're going to sew the side seams up, then you're going to take the casing and turn it down. And then I have a real good way of finishing a piece of elastic so that it can be in a circle and be nice and flat. What you're going to do is take a piece of fabric. This is just a piece of muslin, but you can use anything that's stable. And you're going to use that zigzag running stitch again, and you're going to stitch that flat. And then you're going to come and bring the other side around and just basically kiss them so that they are, or let them kiss, I should say, so that they are right exactly together with no overlap. Then you're going to stitch the other side to the muslin or the piece of fabric. And then what you get is a very, very, very nice flat seam that you've put this together, because the last step is to go ahead and stitch down the center, and you close that all the way up. So now what we're going to do is put that elastic on in one other way, because on the very first skirt that I showed you an elastic that was actually sewn in rather than pulled in. And that is a very stable way to do this. So what you want to do is on your skirt, you want to mark the center front, center back, and then you have your side seams as your reference points. And then you're going to take your elastic, you're going to fold your elastic exactly in half from that seam that you just put together. Make a mark in this, and then pull these two together and match this one and make a mark on the sides, so that now you have the 4 spots that you're going to match with the skirt. So here I'm needing to match these points with the center and the sides of this skirt. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to have this really, really full. This is a slinky fabric, and so it doesn't really need to have a lot of width, because this will stretch beyond my hips. So in the waistband here, this waistband can be my exact hip measurement less maybe 1 inch, because of the fact that it's going to stretch. So I'm going to not have a whole lot of bulk I have to work with, and I'm going to stitch with that running zigzag again right on the edge, and as I stitch I pull the fabric. So I pull the elastic and the fabric at the same time as I'm stitching across there. And then once I got that finished, I have it all on here, and as you can see right here, all I've done is just turned this down and I have stitched down. And of course these are white threads, but you can make this so that this actually hides from the fabric if it was black, because that's the way I did my other skirt that I showed you. And so there's not anything that's real bulky. Now on the other side I did do a stitch down, and you can see that it's much more ripply, and also you need to have a zigzag stitch when you do this. And do you see? Because otherwise it will pop the thread if it was a straight stitch. So you can also do this, you're stitching through the elastic and through the fabric. Okay, so now that is our waistband that is elastic. And now let's go to one a little more complex, and this is going to be a darted skirt. But it depends on if you wear this better, you need to make this type, and it won't have a lot of bulk around the waist. Okay, so you have a dart, and you need to make sure that your darts work on your body, so be sure that the amount of the dart is going to work with the fullness of your tummy. So that needs to be taken into consideration when you were doing the adjustments. And then what you're going to do is you're going to mark that dart. And so I just used some tracing paper and a tracing wheel, and you see I just follow that. The tracing paper is folded, and I just follow that, and then you see that there's the dart on both sides. You need to do them both at the same time, otherwise you're going to end up with one that's not the length that's the same or the right spot. So be sure and always do both of them the same by folding it. So now, people ask me a lot of times, do you stay stitch? And I'm like, well, yeah. And the reason I stay stitch is this type of a skirt has a little bit of a curve. And if you have ever not stay stitched and you have a little bit of a soft fabric, you will end up with this stretching out, and it will distort when the curve will get distorted, and you won't have the same fit. So when you stay stitch with the threads, and you see how the threads are kind of moving this direction. Well, then I go from the side to the center and I stop. And then I come from this side to the center and I stop again. So you want to be sure that you stay stitched correctly, because if you just went all the way across like that, it would actually pull, in some fabrics it would actually pull this part and distort it to the side a little bit. So that's the reason why you do this. And especially around a neckline, that is very important to do that. Now let's talk about sewing in the dart. Here is a dart that I sewed in, and I hope you can see what I did. The way that I do, you don't back stitch when you do a dart at the bottom of the point. You start out and when you fold the fabric, of course, you fold both of these so that it matches your line that you marked, and then you're going to stitch. You can back stitch right here, but when you get down here, about an inch or a quarter of an inch from the edge, or half inch from the edge, begin to take your stitch length a little shorter or closer. And so as your stitch length comes closer, your stitches will stick a little bit, they'll be a little bit more firmer together, and you won't have to back stitch. And then I keep stitching off the fabric. And so the last couple of stitches right here, last couple of threads here have a little twist in it. And then I don't have to even knot off. Now, part of that is because I took my stitch length very, very close. Have you ever tried to take out a stitch that is real close and real tight? You can't get it to budge. So that is as good as back stitching. And in a lot of the couture books, you will hear that that is the way that you can actually, instead of back stitching, that's the way that you finish off the ends of your seams. Okay, so now we've got the darts in, do the front and the back the same way. And now we're going to go over and we're going to talk about the next little thing that happens is the zipper. Now in the next segment, after this one, I'm going to tell you all about zippers. So I'm only going to hit just real close, real lightly on this one right now, so that you know how to do it basically. I always put a invisible zipper in, but I know there are other zippers, and I know many people just, oh, invisible zipper. But if you try it one time, you will really know what I'm talking about. It hides, and you don't have to worry about your stitches being a little bit crooked. And look in the stores. There is nothing that is made that doesn't have an invisible zipper in it. And they're ready. They're there at the stores for you. You can buy them now. So basically, I'm just going to tell you the real quick things that you can do here. You have a special foot. You're going to stitch the right side of the zipper face down on the right side of the fabric. That's the first step. And you're going to stitch down. Now, for some reason in the instructions, they do it the opposite way. Every time I did it the opposite way on this side, I got confused. So I always do it on this side, on my right side, and put this face down. Okay, so then I'm going to get that down, go all the way down the corner, and flip this over, and then I'm going to take my right side and put it down, and then I'm going to flip this back. Now I'm actually going to show you this in the next segment so you can see it at the sewing machine. So this is a little introduction to how easy it goes in. And then at the bottom of this, you're going to just come down and stitch from the point that you stopped, and you'll pull this back. And like I said, I'm going to show you that very shortly, and you will understand how easy it is. And so now we have the skirt all together. Well, I shouldn't say all together. We still have the band to do. So I want to show you a couple of ways that you can do the band. First of all, here's my zipper. And this is actually an invisible zipper, and it's a totally different color, and you barely see. But here is the way that most of the bands will tell you that they go on. You stitch the band on, and then you understitch. So that means that you take the facing. This is actually a facing, not a band, I'm sorry. This is the facing. You're going to take the facing and you're going to turn it up, and then you're going to stitch right on the edge of the facing onto the seam allowance. So that helps to turn this and make it so that it doesn't peak up. I purposely did this in a different color so you could see the transition between the two of these. So this is one way to do it, and this is what I end up feeling like I have a lot of bulk and problems with, is that as you turn this just like this, you end up with a lot of bulk right underneath here, and then it's real hard. And then you have to stitch down here, and you got to make sure that you don't get into the zipper. So you want to be sure that you move it over slightly. One neat thing that I have discovered, and that is to take away, when I'm stitching, before I stitch the top of the band, before I stitch this top right here, I take away some of this seam allowance on just this part, just the facing. I take away about 1/4 of an inch, and then I meet this, and then when I stitch this, then I stitch this, and then I stitch across this, and I can actually turn that down, and look how clean that will end up to be. Do you see? That's all stitched down. Now all you have to do if you're going to do something with a band is just stitch the edge together and flip it over. Okay? Now I haven't got a whole lot of time left, so if you want to see how to put the zippers in, you be sure and stay tuned and come back, and we will see you soon. Hi and welcome back. We're still talking about skirts, and now we're going to do the construction of different zippers. There are so many different choices out there that I want to be sure that you know different ways that you can do the zippers, and different types of zippers there are too. So I'm going to try to hit all of those in this segment. Well, now, one of the things that happens when you put in a zipper is the fabric begins to buckle, and people have a hard time putting zippers in sometimes because they think they can't go straight, or the bottom of the fabric when they're stitching twists to the top and you have this ripply look. So let me tell you one of the secrets, and that is to stabilize the back of your seam allowance. So where you're going to put your zipper in, this is a fusible knit tape, and it's already this size. It's I think it's a 1 inch or 1 1/4 inch wide tape, and it's a knit, so it's nice and flexible, and it fuses to the fabric. And if you will fuse that to your fabric edge, that will help. And you really only need to fuse it down to the bottom where the zipper is. You don't have to fuse all the way down to the back of the seam. So basically, if you're going to do a regular zipper, basic zipper, you're going to start by basting in the seam after you fuse it, baste it in to the mark place. So mark where you're going to put your zipper. Now I do have some more information about where you put the tab, but I'm going to hit that just a little bit later. And then this part of the seam below, you need to completely secure that. So what I usually do is I stitch this first, and then I baste this. And that way I know I have a good back stitch right here, and so that I know that that's not going to come out. Because once that you get that zipper in, that little spot right there is going to be a problem if it comes out. So be sure that that is stable. And so we want to back stitch and make sure that we hit that real nice and secure. So now let's come over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to show you, we're going to back up, and I'm going to first show you the invisible zipper. I talked about the invisible zipper in this last segment that I just had, but I want you to know that how to do it on the machine and the kind of the different things that happen with it. First of all, the way that I was showing you, that was just a plain fabric. But I'll tell you what happens sometimes with a plaid is that you end up with the plaids, they have to meet. So I have a way of matching that plaid up that will help. First of all, you're going to, remember how I told you, you're going to put the zipper, the flat part of the front, the right side of the zipper down to the right side of the fabric, and you're going to stitch that. The other thing that you're going to do is have a special foot. If you have a invisible zipper, you need a foot that tracks over the ridge of this teeth. And now on the instructions, it's going to tell you to go to the iron and press down this part, the teeth, Just be careful that you don't press with a real hot iron, because it could melt some of the plastic on that teeth. I have not found that I needed to press that down, but it depends on your foot. You need to be sure that the foot has a good little ridge. This foot right here has a neat little ridge that is perfect for this. And this actually comes with the comes as a purchase for the sewing machine, but you can purchase these zippers with in the notions part with the zippers. So you can get the foot that way. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, in order to line up these plaid marks, I'm going to I got one side sewn, and then I'm going to close up the zipper, and I'm going to turn the plaid over, and I'm going to mark each one of those plaid markings where I want to match that. Okay, and if you have a seam, you can do the same thing. Then I have to open this, and by the way, when you do an invisible zipper, you do not put the seam together first of your back. Do not put the back seam together. You're going to leave all of the back open, and then you're going to do the very bottom at the last thing that you do. Okay, so now I have one side on, and I have my marks on here, and now I'm going to bring my right side to the right side of this zipper. So here again, my right side to the edge of the zipper. So here it is. Right side. So now my right side is down, and my zipper tape is right side up in order to get them to match. Okay? Be sure that you're matching your seams. Okay, now I'm going to flip it back over, and I'm going to start, and I want to show you how this works. And we're going to line this